Okay, well, here we are in Ephesians chapter 5. This chapter is often called the marriage counseling chapter because Paul has a lot of advice for husbands and wives in here, as well as members as well. So we're going to get into that. So really, see chapter 5 as a continuation of what we learned in chapter 4. So if you haven't watched chapter 4, make sure you do that because this is a continuation. So verse 1, he says here, "Be ye therefore followers of God as dear children." So again, keep commandments, follow God. There are works you need to do. Verse 2, "And walk in love, as Christ also hath loved us, and hath given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling savor." Now, this is talking about burning incense. Incense is a prayer to God. This is why they burned incense in the ancient temple, is it is seen as a prayer to God. And this is the offering of sacrifice. So this is temple language in verse 2. Okay, we see this. This is ancient temple language. Offering, Christ has made an offering to us, a sacrifice to God as a prayer to please help bless these people. I've suffered the price. I've paid the price. They will get into heaven because of me when they keep my commandments. If you want to know more, Ephesians 1 and 2, we talk about that quite a bit, that idea. I think it's Ephesians 2 actually more. Verse 3, so these are the things that we basically should not be doing. "But fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not be once named among you, as becometh saints." We got to get the sex out. We got to stop thinking that sex is a major factor in everything we think about. Get rid of that mindset, okay? All uncleanness, get rid of it. You can't be unclean and a saint. Get rid of it. Covetousness, that is like pride. That is wanting more than you have, wanting other people's stuff. That, even like adultery, thoughts. I want that person. I want to, whatever. All of that's got to go. Okay. Do not let you as saints have those things among you. If you do, we need to be better as saints. Verse 4, he says, "Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks." So Wayment says, the author offers advice on proper and acceptable speech. The guiding principle in this exhortation is the concept of what is fitting for the saints. So it's not about just goofing off and joking around and not taking things serious. It's learn to give thanks, learn to be positive. Do not belittle people and break them down, but build people up. That is what saints do. Verse 5, he goes into, "For this ye know, that no whoremonger, nor unclean person," now the Greek term for immoral means sexual behaviors that are not allowed, "nor covetous man, who is an idolater, it hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God." So again, we got to cut the sexual language out. We got to get rid of that mentality that sex is everywhere, and we see it all over the place. Cut it out. Get rid of it. Stop telling those stupid jokes. Get all that out. Get that mindset out of your mind, because that's not becoming a saint. Get the covetousness out. Get the unacceptable things out. Now, here's what's interesting is what is seen as acceptable and unacceptable as far as sexual activity has changed over the years. What we see as acceptable was unacceptable back then, and vice versa. Realize when they talk about sexual sin in the scriptures, their main target is anything where the man is on the bottom. That's what they saw as sexual sin. The man is on top, it didn't matter who's on the bottom. So that's a whole different ball of wax. We totally reinterpret sex today that's different. So that's also a good reason why modern prophets and apostles are good, to help us to interpret the gospel for our day and age as well. So let's get in here. Verse 6, "Let no man deceive you with vain words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience." Now, Paul's brought this idea up of vain messages, of false prophets, false messages. So be careful who you get your advice from. Realize some people are telling you falsehoods about Jesus out there, and some people are not. How do you know the difference? It's through the Spirit of God. Having that Spirit with you. If you know God, if you have a close relationship with God, then That will help you. The Spirit will help you to discern who is saying the truth and who is not. It's not who do you agree with that's true and who you disagree with is false. That's subjective. What's objective is using the Spirit of God to know the objective truth. You need to have Him there to help you, okay? Verse 7, be not ye therefore partakers with them, meaning don't give into the false lyings and things that they're telling you. Verse 8, for ye were sometimes darkness, but now ye are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light. So we're not light because we're good. We're light because He is good. We are the candle. We're not the light. Okay? A candle isn't light by itself. A candle carries the light. That's important. Somebody has to give it light. Somebody has to start it and then bring it to the candle, and then it carries the light. We are candles. When we have Christ in our life, we have light, and through that light, we can learn and discern and understand things, and other people will see it as well. We want to be walking as children of light in our life. Verse 9, in these parentheses, it says, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. So this gets into like Galatians chapter 5, if you want to go there to learn more about the fruits of the Spirit, where the fruits of the Spirit is manifest in all goodness. So if it's good, wholesome things, then the Spirit is going to be there. If it is not good, wholesome things, the Spirit is not going to be there. Those are the things we should get rid of. If it's entertainment that's not wholesome and good and positive, get rid of it. Let's do things to keep the Spirit with us more. That's the important part. Verse 10, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord. Again, the fruits of the Spirit, the children of light, that Spirit in you that you get from Christ by following Him will help you prove what is acceptable unto the Lord. Verse 11 now, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Now that does not, verse 11 does not say hate people who are different than you. It doesn't say that at all. It says reprove them, help them see the difference between darkness and light. They have to make their choice. Now there's a big assumption that is in this, because you have to first make sure you are in the light before you can reprove somebody else who's not there. The only way to know truly that you are in the light is the Spirit of God with you. Seek to have the Spirit clean up your life, clean up your attitudes, behaviors, what you're doing, to have the Spirit with you more. The more you do that, the more you will understand what is right and what is wrong. But you have to do that. That is where you get it from. It's not a subjective judgment. Because they're different than me, they're wrong and I'm right. That is subjective, and both of you can be wrong at the same time. You need to focus on, how do I know I'm right? That is the Spirit of God with you. When you have the Spirit of God with you, you will understand you're right. Then you can help other people out with a loving kindness for them, not an anger, resentment, or reproval against them. Verse 12, for it is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. So again, don't dwell on what happens in the darkness. There's so much of a sensationalness in the world today that says, ooh, I want to know what they're doing behind closed doors. I want to know the sensationalness. No, that's not our focus. That's not our goal. We don't need to read a book about sex because that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to understand how somebody was abused or all those kinds of things. Our goal is to follow Christ. Stay focused on Him. Leave the worldly baloney behind. You know, this is, I think, a classic example of this is when you see in those little, on your social media feeds, the news articles come up, oh, see this actress in her new string bikini. Okay, understand, the only reason you're going to click that button to look at that actress is to check out her body. If that's what you're doing, maybe you shouldn't click that link in the first place. Because should we be objectifying her body? Probably not. Because here's the thing, if you had another link that said, come look at the books this actress is reading, you probably would never click it. Because you don't care about her intellect. You only care about how you feel looking at her body. That's what he's talking about here. Get rid of the stupid stuff. Be like, okay, if the only reason I'm going to go look that up is to look at her body, I shouldn't do it. There was a time, this happened with Britney Spears. There was a time she had a really low moment in life. She went out, bunch of photographers took pictures of her and realized as they took pictures she was not wearing underwear. So they had pictures that were very inappropriate of Britney Spears. Rather than go, ooh, that's inappropriate, we shouldn't show that. They made lots of money revealing inappropriateness of Britney Spears. Not that she was necessarily inappropriate, but they were inappropriate. But here's the problem. If you're going to click that link, oh, come look at Britney Spears without underwear, realize you're looking at inappropriateness. There's no reason to look at that. Ignore those links. Ignore the bait to look at those stupid things. That's what we got to get rid of. Okay? Get rid of that stuff. The less we click and look at that stuff, the less they will even do it because they'll realize there's no money in it. If nobody looks at it, then I don't take a picture of it because there's no money in it. That will start to change behaviors for them, hopefully. But you just need to realize, don't look at that stuff. If it's not helping you come to Christ, then maybe you shouldn't worry about studying it in the first place. Just saying. Just something to think about, okay? All right, so let's jump in here. Verse 13, but all things that are reproved are made manifest by the light. For whatsoever doth make manifest is light. Now here's the thing. It doesn't mean that you tell people what's wrong. It's the light that shows the people what is wrong. You have to bring the light. And then as you talk with them, they will admit, oh, yep, that's wrong. I need to change. It's the light that makes the difference. And it's the light that you bring with you that helps them to make the difference. Missionary work is not an intellectual experience of how can I justify my beliefs over your beliefs, thus you'll join my church. It is how can I bring the light more to people so that the light will influence them. And now they have a choice to make. Oh yes, look, this is clearly, there's a difference here. Maybe I don't want to do this anymore. That's their agency now at work, and they can choose to follow the light or not follow the light. Your job as a missionary isn't to tell them what they're doing wrong. Your job is to be a better source of light that they can interact with. That's what it comes down to. That's what he's talking about here. Okay, verse 14, wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Now, interesting in verse 4, wherefore he saith. This is verse 14, excuse me. Who said this? We don't know. We don't have that quote anywhere else. It can't be Christ because it says that it mentions Christ in there. So that would be Christ talking third person if it was him mentioning it. Otherwise he'd say, I will give thee light. So this is not Christ saying this, but this was somebody else saying this about Christ. But it's not anywhere else in the scriptures. It's part of a lost part of the scriptures that we don't have anymore. Verse 14. Verse 15, see then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. So this can also mean living. Walk circumspectly is living the gospel. Live not as a fool, but as wise. Redeeming the time, meaning take back your schedule. Prioritize yourself to do things. The day naturally the world wants to just drag you down into evil. You have to counteract that by actively following Christ. That's what they're getting at there. Back verse 17, he says, wherefore be ye not unwise. It's interesting, there's a double negative there. But understand what the will of the Lord is. Now, we're going to get into some things here. This contains one of several New Testament, so Ephesians 5:17 through the end, into the next chapter up to verse 9. So they've kind of split it between the two chapters. This contains one of several New Testament sections called household codes. These are sets of instructions to wives, husbands, children, parents, servants, and masters. The codes recorded in Ephesians and Colossians are both given in connection with instructions on congregational worship. Since the early congregations of the church met to worship and partake of the sacrament in church members' homes, the congregations Paul addressed would have included all members of a typical Greco-Roman household. So there's fathers, husbands, mothers, wives, children, slaves, and of course they're masters to the slaves as well. In the household setting, the well-being of house church congregations was inseparable from the well-being of Christian families. So the idea of your congregational family and your real family is kind of intermingled in these ideas. So we can see this applying to both, basically. So that's what we're going to get into here. This is a little bit more of the beginning of what Paul is writing about family relationships, aka marriage advice. But this is good advice for us too in our relationships with other members of the church too. So he says here in verse 18, be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. So again, focus on having the Spirit, not using chemicals to change your mentality, your mental state. Use the Spirit to change your mental state. Verse 19, speak to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Why do we sing in church? Right there. That is to bring our hearts closer to God through song. Verse 20, give thanks always for all things unto God and the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. So that's how we always give thanks. That's why prayers always end that way, because of this. Okay, verse 21, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Submitting yourselves one to another. So there's a reason to submit to someone else. Verse 22, he says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. So think of, just as much as you'd submit yourself to Christ, you should submit yourself to your husband. Verse 23, he says, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Now, Wayment, in his book, The New Testament, says the call for wives to be subject to their husbands is unique to Ephesians, and among Paul's letters, in fact, and therefore it is difficult to understand the purpose for which these verses were written and included in the letter. They may represent a response to a specific question or issue that arose in Ephesus or the surrounding region and may not have been intended as general counsel. So we don't see this anywhere else but this part of the scriptures where he says this, wives, submit to your husbands. The husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. And so this is an important thing for us to look at. Now, in their day and age, we could see this from a cultural application standpoint because women were often seen as lesser than men. They were seen as property. Men could own women, but women could not own men. And so there's probably a cultural application or translation that's happening with this. Verse 24, therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Now, again, culturally, this has been interpreted to say wives need to obey their husbands and not argue with their husbands. Husbands get final say on everything. And that is 100% false. Even in the church, that doesn't even exist because Christ gives us agency. He wants us to choose what's right, which is what he's encouraging us to do. But he gives us the agency to choose different. So oftentimes in tradition, even in the 1800s, this has been used to justify why you should always do what a man says. That's false. There's nowhere in the scriptures that says you should do what a man says. It says here that you should subject yourself to your husbands just as Christ subjects him, just as the body of the church subjects themselves to Christ. But see, here's the thing is Christ gives the church their choice, the agency to follow them or not. So understand this, husbands, okay? Your job isn't to tell your wives what to do. Your job is to give advice, but give your wives the agency to make her own choice. That is a more appropriate understanding of this. Now let's get into verse 25, which is advice to husbands. Okay, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that it should be holy and without blemish. Christ sacrificed himself. He gave his life to help the church be holy. As a husband, you should love your wife and want to help her be better. Improve her, help her, encourage her. That's your job. And be willing to give your life for her. Okay? That's what you should do. When you get married, your job is to focus on that one woman and not worry about relationships with any other women out there. Focus. Love her, help her, support her, be there for her, but let her have her agency to choose her own way. That's really what this is. That's what you've got to understand about this. Okay, we have definitely culturally misinterpreted these verses in here. We absolutely need to be working on improving ourselves in thinking about these things in regards to each other. Okay, and again, the world wants us to believe a different interpretation that ruins relationships. And what this is saying is no, husbands and wives should love each other so much they come together. They build commitment to each other and they stay there. They stop looking outside the marriage for support. They help each other. That's super, super important to work on. Verse 28, so continue on. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. Now, this is an important thing to think about, okay? Paul just explained to us a little bit of a psychological indication. A man who doesn't appreciate his wife also does not appreciate himself. He's got issues with his own self, and that is preventing him from loving his wife because he doesn't even love himself. This happens, okay? And ladies, the same way. If you don't love yourself, you're going to have a hard time loving somebody else. It starts with you. Changing you, then you can help other people. So if you struggle to love your spouse, realize maybe you have issues with loving and caring and taking care of yourself. Appreciate yourself. Work with yourself and then say, I'm better. I'm going to improve myself and I'm going to love this person as if they're like me. We're connected. We're committed to each other. I need to be a blessing and a help for them without taking away their agency. That's what we should be doing. That's really what this is getting at. We've just misinterpreted what's here. Verse 29, for no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. Okay, these are important points for us to be looking at. Okay, we're coming together, elevating each other, working together. This is super, super important for us to look at. Okay, now with verse 30, this is really interesting. We are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. Those two lines aren't in all the manuscripts that we have of the New Testament. So somebody may have added of his flesh and of his bones. They may have been added later. It wasn't a part of the original manuscripts. So verse 31, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and shall be joined unto his wife. They two shall be one flesh. And again, from the Trinitarian ideas, this doesn't mean they become one substance. They are one in purpose. They're unified in their thinking. That's what this means. So the same words are used to talk about God and Christ as one. In the Greek, they're the same words. We can't have two different interpretations of the same words. So one coming together in purpose and in mind, not in substance. Verse 32, this is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. Now, this is really fascinating, okay? In these verses, he started with women, saying you need to reverence your husband and respect your husband, okay? What's fascinating, wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands. Reverence your husband. That's what he's telling the women. What is he telling the men? Love your wife. He says that at least 3 times in here. He never tells the wives, love your husband. He says, basically, submit, tolerate your husband, reverence your husband. But he doesn't specifically say, love your husband. He says that to the men, though, to love your wife, and love your wife so much, just as much as you love yourself, and that you are willing to die for her. You need to be willing to sacrifice everything for her and be a help and support to her. That's what we should be getting out of this. So let's jump over to the next chapter as we continue Paul's advice.